Welcome, everybody, to the Real Deals Podcast, one of the top real estate investing podcasts on iTunes for the last 7 years. This is the place to be for investing strategies you can actually use, expert interviews, and, of course, some good old-fashioned entertainment. Now, here's your new hosts, Elliott Smith and Cole Rudd Johnson.
What's up, Real Deals Podcast listeners? Welcome to another episode. Today we have on Mike Ayala. We got to spend some time with him down in Arizona in his office. It was awesome. Great day. Super excited for this one. Mike has experience that goes beyond just real estate. He has his companies in real estate now, but he goes into extensive detail on his past with his HVAC company and what it was like to build a 300 employee company at age 24 and the pitfalls and learning lessons that came from that. So super excited for this one. But before we get into that, Mr. Elliott, what's been going on in your world?
Not much, man. I'm super pumped. This is one of the last interviews from when we were down in Arizona for that couple of days. And This one, we showed up in, where is he? He was in Gilbert, and he had an office, had a whole studio set up. We actually were on his show, which is like a 2-part show. We did it last week. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, it's a really good show, and I think you really enjoy it. But then we flipped the script on him and started asking him questions. And the cool thing about Mike, I met him last year when I was at a meetup together with some people, but he gets into, like Cole was saying, building this business, starting at 24, talking about with little kids too. And he built a huge business, kept taking risk and challenge it, and just going for it, just going for broke really. And now he owns, he sold out of that, and now he owns $55 million in mobile home parks. So really excited. You're gonna get a lot of good nuggets out of that. But other than that, what's going on with me? We closed officially on our 8 unit. I know I've been talking about that quite a bit. Super excited. So it's in Vancouver, Washington. It's a couple 2-1s and then 1-1s. Rents are right around $8,200 a month right now. We bought it for $1,033,000. We have 2 other partners in the deal. We came in with a little bit less money because we were kind of the principal in the deal, but we still own a third of it. We went through a whole commercial loan process with the credit union. And if you haven't done that, dude, it's like a freaking colonoscopy, literally colonoscopy of your finances and everything in between. So it definitely was eye-opening how much information they want going even more from the residential world to the personal world. But should cash flow, we got a great rate, 30-year term, 4.25% interest, so 30-year AM and 15-year term. So our payments are right around $3,600 a month. And then we got some CapEx and other, expenses in there, but it should cash flow from day one really well. Doesn't need a ton of really any work. It's just more of like a treasury asset. So I'm going to get our money in. That's going to be, it's right around a 7 cap is how we figured out, 7.5 cap. And, we're trying to keep up with inflation. So we're putting $20 in assets now that, is losing 2% or more to inflation. And we're at a 7% cap rate. So really excited about that one. That caps off the year and ends the year with 43 units total in our portfolio.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's finally, we made it out of the rat race. That was our big goal this year, to make enough money to not have to work really anymore. So we have enough where all our expenses are covered by and then some, and it's been a great year. So
yeah, I'm not there yet.
Yeah, you're 22 though. You get there. Yeah.
With us, I mean, we're just rolling. We're trying to map out what 2021 is going to look like for our real estate company. We've been hiring and firing and tweaking stuff. I just spent with my business partner 3 days down in Phoenix again this last week. So I was there with Elliott the week before, doing some podcasts, and I was there again last week for a mastermind, breaking down our business and kind of just collaborating with some big players from around the country on what 2021 is going to look like, some cool strategies I'm excited to share with this podcast over the next couple of weeks. Nice. And yeah, man, our pipeline's rolling. We closed on a flip last week. We closed another wholesale yesterday. So we're going to close out 5 or 6 escrows this month.
Good year.
Keep it rolling, a good month into the year, and then hopefully ramp it up more in 2021 even more.
Yeah, so even more exciting though, guys. So Cole flew down after his mastermind, flew back from Phoenix on Sunday to Seattle, caught the early flight on Monday, came over, picked him up, stayed with us, my family for a couple of days. We really dived in with the call center. We've got some new structure, some new things we're doing there. Man, we can't wait to tell you, we've signed some data contracts this week that is just going to blow your socks off. Top tier, top level data, the best they got in the industry. and we got great pricing. We're going to be able to compete and beat 99% of people out there. Super excited for that in the call center. We not only that, Cole and I spent a bunch of time, we kind of hopped onto the microphone with this podcast, kind of just, on a whim. It was kind of, rookies. Tucker's kind of like, just take it over. And we didn't know what we were doing. So really spent some time mapping out how we're going to segment this show and really what we want this show to look like moving forward. It's really going to be a show that I think I would want to listen to if I was getting started, or even not even getting started, but in my spot in my career. And we're just basically going to bring you in our community and our family, and you can kind of ride along with us, and we'll have some guests, we'll have some monologue shows, but take action items. We really dove in and said, most of these podcasts or these gurus or these information shows, they're 1% basically info, or what were you saying?
1% information.
Yeah.
99% action.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna have. So we're gonna go action items, because most of them are, the opposite. They don't give you a lot of action items. They just give you all these broad range of, I did this, high level, I own 50 million units, or all this stuff, and you're like, how do I get there? So you got to follow along the journey with Cole and I, and we're gonna have action steps every week. We're gonna take. We're also gonna put some direct mail or cold calls or live seller calls every week at the end of the show. So. And then we'll have some good guests on here as well.
I think a good example of that too is when we had Ken McElroy. Ken McElroy on a couple months ago, and he was talking about how he. I asked him that question, like, hey, a lot of our listeners are, just getting into it, or they're not $1 billion of real estate under management. He was this real deal example of this lot he bought in Arizona for $300,000 that had a billboard on it, and he subdivided the property, so the small piece of land that had the billboard was removed. He kept that, leased it out, $4,000 a month, sold off the lot, got all his money out. Yeah. And it's just an example of how you can do deals at any level, and they're out there for everyone. So that's just an example. We're gonna be getting all of our guests to dig into stuff like that in the future. So
one action item, guys, I'm gonna leave you with. We're gonna kind of start off right now. I've been getting a lot of feedback. I've been giving this advice out for years. I'm getting a lot of feedback from people saying it's working. They're calling me saying, hey, 2 weeks, they call me after 2 weeks. Hey, I'm talking to sellers. I got a deal that I might be getting. I made an offer. I got a viable property. So here's what you can do right now. After listening to this show, I want you to go Driving for Dollars. You can use the Driving for Dollars app by getting it. Go pick a spot in your town. Go get 500 to 1,000 addresses. Then just go cold call them. And all I want you to do, one by one, call those people that have that you wrote down on your list, and say, hey, my name's Elliot. I was driving the neighborhood and noticed you own a house at 123 Main Street. Are you interested in selling? And just start talking to people. So that's one action item. It costs hardly any money. You just got to use the Driving for Dollars app, because that'll give you skip data, so you can have phone numbers. You can use your cell phone. You don't need any fancy system. Go do that. Leave us some notes on the podcast page or on our Instagram, see if it worked for you. But other than that, I think
this is a great show. I'm excited to get this out there.
Yep. All right, guys. We'll talk to you next week. Hopefully you're having a good holiday season so far, and the world hasn't fallen apart yet. So we'll see what happens in 2021, but we'll talk to you next week. Peace.
All right, Real Deals podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Ironbridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Ironbridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Ironbridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So Do yourself a favor, reach out to Iron Bridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did.
What's going on, Real Deals podcast listeners? Back here, actually in Gilbert, Arizona.
I hologrammed in.
Yeah, Cole flew down. We're in studio with our friend Mike Ayala. We just got done shooting a show for him, and so we're going to flip the script on him. And we're in the studio with all these lights. We're not behind a camera or a Zoom computer screen. It's kind of nice. So, Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm glad to be here, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a perfect show because I don't know that much about you coming in here. I didn't know anything about you really, so I think it'll be an awesome opportunity to ask questions the viewers would want to know too. So, what is kind of your background, your story, how you got into what you're doing now? Kind of the brief.
You want to go way back or how? Like,
yeah, man, we got till 2.
Yeah.
So I'm actually a plumber by trade. A lot of people don't know that about me. I went to a 4-year apprenticeship school. Went through Associated Builders and Contractors. Got a job as a plumber, actually with a company that I'd been working summers, like as a summer student. Just cleaning the yard and that kind of stuff. And when I graduated, went through the apprenticeship program through a series of events. Like I actually said I never wanted to actually work there. The owner tried to get me to, but found myself just kind of stuck. And it's funny because my wife tells this story a lot, but I was actually working at this place called Delta Rubber. And out of nowhere, it's weird. You know those times in life when you just do something, you're not really thinking about it, and it changes the course of your life? We were kind of talking about this earlier on my show, right? But I was literally at work. I'm working in the warehouse of Delta Rubber. Great job. I'm making $8.90 an hour or something. And I went over.
He's old, guys.
Yeah, this was probably 1997.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
so negative 1 years old.
Yeah. So I'm working and I'm actually enjoying my job, but I just went over and I picked up the phone and I called. The guy's name was Doug Snyder that owned this company, and I'm like, hey, does that job offer still stand? And he's like, yeah, you can start Monday. And this was like Friday afternoon, and so I called Kara. We weren't married yet. I'm like, hey, I took a different job. I'm starting Monday, but the bad thing was I was going to be working out of town, and she tells this story a lot. That changed the trajectory of everything in our life. And she tried to stop me because I was going to be working out of town and she didn't want me to be gone. And again, we weren't married, but she's like, I don't think you should do this and this and that. And I just knew, it's almost like the phone grabbed me, right? And so anyway, I go to work for this company. Fast forward, I ended up quitting there, which we can talk about why, but I quit there 4 or 5 years later at the age of 24. Started my own business with a business partner at that point in time. It was a plumbing and heating service company. And
what did that look like, that initial, how did you guys work together at the time? How did you know that partner?
Yep. Yeah, we had worked together in the other business. And, one of the main reasons, so 2 things were happening. And these are those things in life, again, that we talk about all the time, that you don't really know what's happening to you. It's happening for you, right? So 2 things were happening. The guy that owned the company had sold it once to a big conglomerate, and they went bankrupt. And so after him being retired, basically out of the business for 2 years, he had to come step back in and take it back. And he was obviously checked out. And so he was going to sell the business to 5 of us. And so we're sitting around a breakfast table one morning talking about buying this business. And the guy that was basically there was 4 of us, and then a guy that was like all of our bosses that had been there for 40 years or whatever. He's like, well, this is how I'm going to run the company and this, and we're going to be equal partners. And I'm like, I've often said anything with 2 heads is a monster. Even in a partnership, you've got to have clear roles. Like you guys were talking about this in your business. Mm-hmm. Even though you guys are partners, like people have to make decisions, right? You got to stay in your lane. I'm looking around this, and even at the age of 23, I'm like, this is going to be a disaster. Like this is going to be a train wreck. And so I remember leaving with my future business partner. He's driving. We're sitting at a stoplight. It's weird because you say these details and it doesn't really matter to anybody else, but I just know exactly where I was. And he said, what do you think? And I said, I think we should just leave and start our own business. And we did. He put in his notice like 3 weeks later. Well, we put our notice in together. I ended up finishing a job, and then we went off and started this company together.
I think that's an important note because like I have a similar story. I was sitting in an Applebee's and I was like, yeah, let's start real estate business. Okay, we started cold calling the next day. And the not waiting part, because so many people will have that conversation, mm-hmm. and then it'll be 2 months later, and they'll have the conversation again, and then it'll be a year later, and they'll have it again. So I think that people that do it, it usually is a story like that, where it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and then
or you let you were saying Kara was trying to talk you out of it, or you let your parents or your friends or somebody. And so then if you wait long enough, then all of a sudden these people are going to keep trying to talk you out of it. And you're like, maybe I believe them, maybe I shouldn't do it. But you're like, fuck it, I'm just going for it.
Yep.
You know, this feels right, and I'm going for it, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you usually do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I love the Marines carpe diem, like just seize the moment, right? Like we don't know what life's going to bring at us. I mean, you know, they're constantly talking about adapting, overcoming, improvising. That's the key, I think, is just move through it. And you know, when it's not always going to work out the way you think it is, but you can adjust from there. Cool. But being led by that intuition is so important.
What did the early phases of that first business you started look like? Was it chaos with you and your partner at 23, 24? What did
and
that
what were
look
you
like?
doing? Like, explain the business maybe a little bit. So
Yeah. And by the way, this is more of a real estate show, right?
yeah, it's real estate. Yeah.
And
But it's real deals. So we're talking about deals, and it's how you got there. And running a real estate company, what I'm finding out, is a business. You have to be a business owner right now. So let's figure out how to run a business.
Totally. And if we think about it, we should circle back to that, because I went from a business owner with a bunch of passive real estate to selling my business to now moving back into a full-time. I thought I was going to go continue to be a passive real estate investor. But what I realized, we started a company, and now, you know, you fast forward and we've got 35 mobile home park communities, and my wife and I still have a portfolio in Nevada. And you realize what Elliot just said. What starts out as a passive portfolio, if you continue to grow that, it always turns into a real estate business. It's no longer passive. That's a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Exactly. So walk us through that business, what it was, kind of give us the, you know, the first, you know, maybe overview of the first year, and then kind of what it was.
Because I'm sure there's stuff you learned at that first business that has translated. And
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, so many people, we were talking about college before we started recording, right? And college is cheap compared to the lessons we learned in business and real estate and all that. But I would never trade a college diploma and that cheap price for the lessons that we learned in real estate, because you can't take that from me. And most people, when they get out of college, don't really, I mean, they're just getting started, right? So
most of those college degrees are worth about as much as the paper they're printed on.
Totally, 100%. I've hired more college graduates than I've never even thought about going to college, and I have a ton of them working for me. Okay, so the business itself was kind of interesting, because, you know, Dylan, who's sitting in studio with us, asked me at one point in time, he's like, did you just like wake up one day and want to like have a dream to have a plumbing and heating? No, it wasn't like my dream to just go solve the world's problems around plumbing and heating. But I knew that there was a better customer service experience too. And so from the get-go, there was this, I almost felt like it was a calling. I know that sounds weird, but I knew from the get-go that we could deliver plumbing and heating service in a much better way to our clients and our customers than the companies that I was working for and were around me were doing it. And I knew that I could also make a profit while doing it. Anybody who says you're not in business to make a profit is full of crap. But I also knew that the way that the employees were treated and the processes and systems, the way that I felt so many times, was not right, and it wasn't fair. And so I kind of took this approach from the get-go when I was 25 years old. And I still believe this today. If you want to be successful in business, there's really 4 key components. And this sounds super simple, but if you take care of the customers, right? You take care of the employees, you take care of the owners, and this is where I think most of us fail. You take care of your vendors, you'll have a recipe for success. If you can figure out how to have all 4 of those, and by the way, if you've got a shitty vendor that's not showing up on you, you can't just take care of them, right? Same with employees. I'm not saying be a walkover, but at the same time, we spend so much time thinking about the investors or the owners, the employees, the customers. Most people focus on only the customer experience, but we have our internal customers, our employees. So anyway, I'm this 24-year-old kid. I could have been 23, with just kind of like the real reason. I told you the story about sitting around the table with the 5 partners. That was one of the reasons why. But here's what was really driving me that I think led me to a hell yes. I was working out of town. The reason why my partner quit sooner than I did, even though we put the notice in, I was doing a $3 or $4 million casino remodel an hour and a half away from home. My wife's pregnant with our 3rd kid.
Jeez.
And I'm literally working 90 to 100 hours a week. And 7 days a week, I'm staying in a hotel. I'm remodeling this casino and hotel. I'd leave Sunday night at 7:00, drive home, wash my clothes, say hi to my family while she's pregnant with my 3rd, And then I'd leave at 3 o'clock in the morning and be gone for a week again.
Well, if you had 3 kids at 24, you're probably doing something other than just washing your clothes.
Well, she was pregnant.
I know that. Yeah.
But you know, and backing up a little bit, my wife and I, and I mentioned this when we were recording earlier, but I grew up. We can take the situations in life and let them affect us in a bad way, or we can take them and learn from it. And so I grew up with a shitty dad. I mean, he was abusive to my mom. He was an alcoholic. He was a drunk. He'd come in and out of my life. Like as a little kid, I didn't know why, but he'd disappear. He'd be gone for, like I was, right? But I was gone because I was working and doing what I need to do for my family, right? Which so many people say, oh, I'm doing this for my family. Mm-hmm. Well, I learned so many lessons from my dad about who not to be and what I didn't want to be. And when Karen and I got married, we got married at an early age. We dated in high school. I was a shithead for a while, meth, drugs, jail. So we were separated for a bit. But then when we finally came back together, she said something that was so brilliant. She was working, I was working. And when we first got married, she said, I'll circle back to this, but this is the real why we started the business. She said, I'm not going to rely on her income. We're not going to rely on her income. So she would take her income and put it in a separate bank account because she knew when she started having kids, she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. Her dream was to be the best mom in the world. And my kids are now 20, 18, and 16, and she's accomplished that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. Our kids are amazing. And I'm not saying that doesn't have anything to do with me, but the fact that she was there for our kids, awesome. But then you fast forward and I'm working out of town in our third pregnancy and I didn't sign up to be the absentee dad either. Mm-hmm. So I swore I was not going to be that dad that missed soccer games and baseball games and any of that.
Do you think that was kind of like a subconscious pattern you're running from your childhood?
Totally.
What you're talking about and you're just that kind of avoidant.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, it was totally subconscious pattern. But not having that, I knew what I was missing my whole life, but I never really pulled that together until recently. You know, we were talking about, sometimes those deep traumas and in the early childhood things, we don't know exactly what they are, but then you go start doing the deep work that is so challenging and why most people don't do it. But once you start doing that and you figure out what it is and you put your finger on it, you know why you were doing it, and then you can just take it to the next level too. So I'm working out of town. I'm missing my child's third pregnancy. So I think we were looking for something different anyway. And then these opportunities come together. So a couple things that I learned about business early on. Number one, all of our competitors in that market had started in the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. We started in 2004. And so I want to say that we were, amazing business owners and all this stuff, but there was a lot of opportunity in that market. Plus it was a gold mining community. So, the price of gold was $380 when we started and gold was climbing. Yep. And, 3 or 4 years after we started the business, we're heading into 2008, which was a challenge for everyone, but gold is
gold
doing
spiked,
even better, right?
Almost spiked to in 2011 or something like $2,000 an ounce or something.
Yeah. And then, so our company, we actually got our license in June of 2004. And, that first year first half a year, we did like $800,000 in revenue.
Wow.
The next year was like 1.8, 2.7, 3.6, 4.2. We were on the Inc. fastest growing companies in America list in 2009. Like just crazy ride. Here's a couple things that I learned though. I didn't know shit. Like I didn't know about people. We were talking about this earlier
the
too.
How, right?
You
didn't have every single step of the how map. No,
totally.
Yeah.
And I'm a driver, right? I can easily, I've mellowed out, as Elliot said, I'm pretty old now. So I've mellowed out a lot, but I didn't get it back then. We didn't have processes. We didn't know the how. Training was, what the hell's training, right? Employee
Ride
onboarding.
with this guy and figure it out.
It's like just, nowadays we would probably say, look at 100 or 200 resumes in order to interview 10 in order to hire one. Well, back then it was like, how do I hire 100 to keep one? Like that was kind of my philosophy back then. And so anyway, trial by error. But the one thing that I'll tell you, and I think your listeners will relate to this, from the time we opened the business, I didn't know anything about accounting. My partner didn't know anything about accounting, sales, none of that. We were plumbers. And so from the very beginning, I started hiring coaches. I knew what I didn't know, and I'm the dumbest guy in the room, and that's where I try to still stay. I want to be the dumbest guy in the room because if I'm not the dumbest guy in the room, I need to find a bigger room, right? That's what one of my mentors says. And so I think that was really the key to our success. I mean, market timing was good, all of that. We had a desire to do it a better way. But even a desire to do it a better way, I had to go find the best coaching company around plumbing and HVAC service in the country. And I hired him and I worked with him for 6 years. And not only did I work with him, I had a general manager coach, my accounting team had an accounting coach, and my service department manager had a service coach. And we paid them 50 plus grand a year back then, way back then, Elliot,
Yeah.
to come in and coach us.
This is huge because this is not a real estate business by any means. That's why I wanted to talk about it. I didn't even know. Again, you were on the Inc. Fast Growing Companies, which is why I thought this podcast was gonna be awesome. But the stuff that you learned there in hiring coaches, people listening to this, it doesn't matter what business or phase of life you're in. Even with your W-2, there's people you could talk to and get to know that are doing what you're doing better than you are. It's the fastest and easiest way to grow. So
Yeah. I do want to step back though. You said you always want to be the dumbest guy in the room, so I really appreciate that right now. Because that puts us at a high pedestal. It puts us, makes me feel good about myself. But it's very interesting. Like I've sought out, talked about this earlier too. But I sought out mentors. I didn't pay as much really in coaching, but I sought out mentors and I went to add value to them. And how I did pay for coaching though, was I took them deals and I said, I'll do everything, and you just tell me what to do, and I'll split the deal with you. Yeah. There's nothing. You don't have to do anything, right? Yeah. And so it's like, maybe I didn't write a $50,000 check. But, like one of the first deals I did with my current business partner, we made $121,000 on this flip. I could have probably figured my way out and made 100, 110, still done it. I split it with him 50-50. Yeah. So I paid him $60,000 to learn and build that relationship. Yep. And that relationship has blossomed and groomed. And, I hired a life coach last year, life and business coach. And, there's times when you need him more or less. But coaching is important as people see your blind sides. You don't know what you don't know. I don't know. If I hire these guys wrong, am I going to get sued down the road?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I, make some raunchy joke, I had the union called on me multiple times. You don't make those.
Yeah. I had the union called on me at Fran's multiple times because things I would say would come off wrong, and then they would just go to union. So if I didn't, there's things I didn't know.
Yeah.
You can't say that.
If there was a real estate union, they would have been called about.
Yeah. If there's a podcast, yeah.
So transitioning from that first business, I know it's probably a long story in itself, but I want to kind of understand how that led you to the real estate world.
Yeah.
And how that shift happened. What did that look like?
And did you sell the business? You sold the business? Talk about maybe that process too.
Yeah. So I'll tie it all together. So let's go back to mentors for a second, because a mentor, I'll weave all this together. Mentors, I'm a proponent of hiring coaches, obviously. And if you want to go fast and far, hire the best coach you can find. But to Elliot's point on mentors, the challenge with mentors, and we were talking about this earlier, but you were saying, usually when people are looking for a mentor, they say, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? And I loved what you said. And if you want to bring that up, you can.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and I was talking about my experience when I got into real estate at 18, 19. There was 5-6 guys in my area that I wanted to get to know. I'm like, those are the guys. They drive cool cars. They do cool stuff. Like, they have good businesses. It seems like they have it all together. And I did send one coffee message. It's funny. I sent it to Taro, who's like a good friend now. Yeah. And I still have it in my Facebook message thing where it's like a couple years ago. I'm like, hey, do you want to grab a coffee? And then from that point, I'm like, this doesn't work. Yeah. So I was like, I can make so these guys want to be in a room with me. And again, going back to the how, too, it was like I was on a treadmill one day randomly at the gym, and Taro's #1 employee got on the treadmill next to me, and I was like, so then I started talking to him, and I had by that point I had enough to offer where I got a coffee, and that led to a friendship and a mastermind where I met all kinds of different guys. And but yeah, I mean, the mentors is huge, but there's a way to go about.
Yeah. You went and build systems for some of these guys. I mean, you're just telling me one of these guys, you just went and built you charge normally guys $25,000-$35,000. You just went and built it for free because you wanted to, for this guy, because you want to get to know him.
And they want to see you in action. Like now when I approach guys, I know I'm doing stuff. So it's a different vibe than just say, hey, can I take?
Yeah. So the reason why I'm bringing up my mentor is, and he'll probably weave in and out through this conversation, and I've never paid him a penny for coaching or for mentoring. But I met him early on, and I talk about him a lot on my podcast. His name's Barry Liparelli. It was cool because I actually got to interview this 80-year-old guy on my podcast a while back, and he was like, what are you doing to me? Like, but anyway.
That's your mentor?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. We got to go back and listen to that then.
It was a fun conversation. It was kind of all over the place because, I'd ask him a question and 30 minutes later, but anyway, the reason why I want to weave him in, I met him. So he's actually my wife's great uncle. But I had known a guy that was an early mentor of mine in a youth. He was like a youth minister, and so I had kind of met him and connected. Long story short, Barry does a lot of like hard money lending and private lending to people that can't get loans, owned an insurance company, that kind of stuff. And so I was having a business challenge, it's probably year 2. In our business, it's high receivables, high capital, right? And so it doesn't matter how much money revenue you're doing, receivables are taking a while. We're doing a lot of work for the mines, big construction companies. You got to be really careful in business when you're floating a lot of receivables. So I went to Barry and I'm like, hey, we're having cash flow. I just went to him to pick his brain, right?
Did you go there with the intention that you needed money?
No,
from him?
no.
Guys, I want to make that very clear.
What was the intention?
I just wanted him to like help me understand like how to shorten this gap. And, you know, we weren't really financeable then.
But again, you were in business doing stuff. I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
So I went and I just asked him, I'm like, hey, can you take a look at this for me? Because we have, I'm going to make these numbers up, but it was probably $700,000 of receivables. We're having a hard time making payroll, even though, you know, we've got 12% profit margins we're making, but we can't get our money collected fast enough. And he's like, yeah, you need a line of credit. I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I get that, but like, how do I get there? We're year 2 in business, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, I can loan you, you know, some operating capital. What kind of collateral do you have? And I just put a podcast up this morning. Just Barry talks about the 3 C's: character, collateral, and credit. And most of us focus on credit. It's like the American dream to have an 800 credit score so we can buy cars, we can buy houses, we can get more credit cards. That's all consumer debt, right? Mm-hmm. But what Barry taught me is what's more important is collateral and character. And so going through this process, I think where you were going, he ended up loaning me $150,000 of working capital or something. And we didn't really have any collateral at that point in time. But my character was enough that he lent me that on character.
You did have a couple kids, though.
I did,
so
yeah.
That's a good collateral.
You definitely take my kids, right? So, and again, I bring him up because I'll probably weave it in. But on the real estate front, this is how I got into real estate. So it's probably everybody's natural progression. And you guys have probably heard this, but everybody who's super successful probably made their money in business, but stored it in real estate. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that are really successful that, you know, made their money in real estate, but it goes back to what you were talking about. They probably have a real estate business. They're probably not out buying passive real estate.
And there's tons of people who make their money in real estate and don't store it in real estate.
Yeah.
Sure. They store it in cars and boats and
Sure.
so.
Yeah, that's true too.
We're agents. You see these agents all the time. They're selling the dream of home ownership, right?
Yeah.
And they're killing on agents. And I'm like, and I'll talk to him and be like, I was just talking to this guy. He's a commercial broker. And he's the best in our area. He like kills it. And I'm like, so what do you own? You're a commercial broker. I'm like, expecting you to own them. I don't own anything. So you're paying freaking the highest taxes in the world and not own anything?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Well, one of my mentors always says, you know how you can identify a broker because they're a broker than you. I always thought that was funny.
Corny dad jokes, Cole.
Yeah,
Yes,
No,
yeah.
I think I'm getting old. That was funny to me.
Yeah. So you know, fast forwarding a little bit, I go to this coaching company that I found. It's called BDR, Business Development Resource. And you were talking earlier about those pathways that line you up, and I had actually got connected through becoming a train dealer and all these different reasons. So we hire BDR, and they say, you need to go to a thing called Profit Launch, which is annual business planning, and you take 3 days and you go to Seattle, and you know they help you build your business plan for the year. What was interesting is leading up to that, we had to do a workbook. And the first questions, the whole first day was around your personal goals, desires, dreams. And one of the questions they posed, and I still share this all the time today, they said, we want you to ponder this. If your business is not helping you achieve your personal goals and dreams, then you just own a job. You're just a high-paid job owner. And I was like, wow. And so then they took us through this, you know, if money and time wasn't an issue, you know, probably some of the exercises that most of your listeners have done. That was mine and Kara's first time of really going through that. We'd always set goals, but we never really went to that level of thinking if money and time wasn't an issue, what would life look like? And so we went through all that.
Real quick, because I had until this one mastermind I went to, I'd never did that either. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the reason why you weren't doing that before? Like, it was just, you're just so in the day-to-day that you don't really sit back. And because I had the same issue, and it hurt me big time, is I never would, where is this train headed?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the limiting beliefs that we're not born with, but are ingrained in us from the get-go. Like we watch our parents grind, and we hear the words of, you know, you gotta put in 10 hours a day. And there's like all these unintended consequences of the way that we raise our children, us, that teach us, they shut off our dreamers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. characters built through hard work
Mm-hmm.
and long hours. Like, it was always at France, there was always a badge of honor or whatever, who worked the most between the supervisors. And it's like, I'd always look and be like, this isn't right.
Yeah. Well, and if you think about it too, we were kind of having this conversation, but this is one of my like pain points from the time that we're born, essentially, or at least we can start talking. They're like, we're going to go to preschool, and then we're going to go to kindergarten when we're 5, and then we're going to spend 12 years going to school, and then we're going to spend another 4 years going to college, and then you're going to work the next 45 years of your life hating yourself so that someday when you're 65 or 70, you can retire off this pipe dream, hopefully your 401k or Social Security or Medicare or whatever is going to be there. And when you're too old to actually travel and enjoy it, that's when you retire. Like, all of that, I think, guides us into being programmed employees. By the way, the
system's built for employees.
It totally is.
The system in our country is built to build employees.
Think about just the school bell in school. It's like, ding, now you can go to recess.
Yeah.
Ding, now you can, and your goals and everything are lined up for you.
They tell us when to take naps. They tell us when to drink milk. Like,
Yeah.
By the way, this is maybe not going to be popular, and if you want to edit it out, you can. But I think the W-2 is just legalized slavery.
Oh, I 100% agree.
When we look back at 1913 and the Federal Reserve and Rockefeller creating the National Education Association, this is probably for another day in conversation. But all that happened around the same time. That's also when income tax was integrated, right? And so all this happened in the early 1900s to really take us down this path of legalized slavery. And by the way, simultaneously, within a 20-year period, slavery's becomes illegal, and it should be.
Yeah.
It should be, but we just reprogrammed us.
Yeah. So it's funny. I talk to people. People don't get educated. The system doesn't educate people on the world. So like most people think when they're hearing, oh, the Fed's bailing us out or printing money, or the Fed, whatever, they don't understand that in 1913 they passed there's a book called The Creature from Jekyll Isle that speaks to this. The guys got on a secret train to go put this together that were bankers.
Yeah.
JP Morgan, they were bankers because they said there's too many ups and downs in the market. We need to, make it easier for us to not lose our money all the time, stabilize the economy. So let's put and they've tried central banks before in the past, in the 1800s, and they tried them before, but they never worked. And so then they put this in there, and it's run by the bankers for the bankers. Like, people don't understand that the Fed doesn't answer to Congress.
Yeah.
Like, the president appoints them to do their direction, but they don't answer. Alan Greenspan was on one of his famous quotes was like, we answer to nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a little bit. And then the government, they just print money. The government sells the Fed treasury bonds, and it's like, they don't understand that's for the freaking banks.
Yeah.
It's for corporations. So we can,
well, the shareholders of the Fed are the banks.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the banks, last year we started seeing cracks with the overnight lending, and all that stuff. The Fed starts bailing them out with the the repo rates. There's cracks, and now all of a sudden it's just like you got to understand who this world was built for. And if you're stuck working 40, 50, 60 hours a week and you say, this doesn't seem right, like you said, why am I going to work for 40 years? Think about it. Really think about it. It's not about Trump. It's not about Biden. It's not about Pelosi. There's bigger guys running the show, and it's that they're training you from a young age.
And it's a long game. I mean, this is going to last a lot longer than us. And so I want to be clear. I actually ran this by my wife like 3 months ago, and I've talked to Dylan about it. Like, I'm not saying that I agree with slavery in any way, shape, or form, but if you think about this, you live on a plantation, you get your food, you get your ration to go buy whatever you want to buy from the plantation store. And so basically, the only difference between us is we're free to go take time off as long as we put in for it.
As long as you work to earn it, started a new job, you have 1 week of vacation a year.
Yeah, paid. Right?
Yeah.
That's so. Well, okay. So back to we're not taught to dream. We're not taught to think for ourselves. In fact, we're taught that if we team up and we partner up, that's cheating.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, when I was 18, and I started wanting to do my own stuff, run my own business, the amount of backlash you get. Luckily, my family was like, "Do your thing," but everyone else was like, "What is going on? What's that dude doing? Don't do that." And it's so ingrained and deep into our
we've reprogrammed our mind.
Yeah.
We've been reprogrammed the last 2 to 3 generations. And again, it's a long game.
Well, yeah, because we needed it. We needed it after at that point we needed to grow our economy. We started putting more systems and processes in place in the 1900s with Henry Ford and all that. Then after the World War, we became the superpower, so we needed to grow exponentially. And so they teach work hard, and then that grew. And then we needed more production because we're a consumer-built society. Our economy is like 70% of our economy is actually on consumer goods. And so in order to keep that going, we have to keep consuming, and we have to work harder, make more money. It's all a game. That's why the Louis Vuittons, all these things, they can get you in debt to work for that trap.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different though. Yeah.
But yeah, kind of that's a tangent I can go on for
yeah.
sure.
Sorry, you got me excited.
Back
Started
to,
talking about Federal Reserves and
I don't even remember where we were before we jumped to that.
So we were talking about the 3-day profit launch and if money and time wasn't an issue, and you asked me, why do I think that? We've been reprogrammed.
Yeah.
That was the short version of we've been programmed to think that way. Now, I don't think naturally as humans we're born to conquer. We're born to think bigger. We're born to dream. I don't care what your spiritual beliefs are. It doesn't matter what realm you come from or religion. If you just really look back to God in its essence, a creator, like we're born to create. Mm-hmm. So we've just been reprogrammed. So they asked us the question and they told us to set goals, and we're thinking of this through the lens, and I think this is really important. If your business is not, whether it's a real estate business or a passive investment business, whatever, if it's not helping you achieve your personal goals, then you just own a job. And so my wife and I crafted our entire life, and people would argue with me about this, but I'm telling you, at 24 years old, even experiencing the type of growth, we got to 100 employees in 5 years.
Jeez.
So even experiencing that type of growth, I kept my family first. I didn't miss football games. I didn't miss baseball games. It's doable.
At that age, you could have still been playing football and baseball.
Sure. You see his gray hair?
Yeah. 24, 25. Geez.
Now he's got a bowling league.
He's got a bowling league.
Well, and I guess the reason why I want to interject that is because, Kara and I are launching a couples mastermind, and we're so excited about it because you can have a successful business, and you can have a successful portfolio, and you can work a successful job and keep your family first. And I hear this so many times. I'm part of a group, a mastermind that's all just focused on dads, and I hear these are all just the limiting beliefs that are programmed in us. I hear it all the time though, like, I'm doing this for my family. Bullshit.
You're doing it for you and your ego.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you just don't know how to do it other ways, but there is other ways. And so bringing this back to, if your job, business, portfolio, whatever is not helping you achieve your personal goals, you just own a job and you're no different than anyone else. And so keeping that a priority is important. But here's how I got into real estate, which was the question. Kara and I set a goal. This was like our big stretch goal at this point in time. We said, if we could have, of course, there was the plane on there, which I ended up getting and became a pilot. And there's the mountain house and the lake house and all the normal stuff, right? But we said, if we could get 20 income producing properties, 2 a year for 10 years, by the time I'm probably 35 or 25 when I'm going through this planning. So by the time I'm 35, I would have 20 houses. And the way that I was thinking back then, I didn't understand seller carry or any of that. So if I'm 35 years old and I've just bought my 20th house, 30 years later, I'd be paying off my 20th house, right? Mm-hmm. 30-year mortgages. That's how I thought about it then. So by the time I'm 65 years old, I'd have enough. Because in my mind at that point in time, as a 25-year-old business owner, I didn't realize that I'd be exiting that business 10 years later. And, I think I'm probably on business number 12 now or something. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize, I thought I was going to be 65, 70 years old, still living a good life and having my freedom along the way, but I'd still be running that business. That's what...
You weren't dreaming big enough.
I wasn't dreaming big enough. And so my limiting belief at that point in time, and a lot of people would say that, having 20 income producing properties a year and a business that was spinning off, paying me $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year is not limiting. But that was my limiting belief then. I just thought that having 20 houses would be like, la. Yeah. So
it's almost like the when you initially start to separate from that, like that pre-programmed mindset of, make my 50, 60K a year, put it in all in my 401k, retire at 65, have something to enjoy, hopefully. Mm-hmm. it's like the further you stretch from that, it's super painful. But the further you stretch from that, the bigger and bigger you're able to dream. So when you're just starting out, when you're 25, like me, I can't even think big enough still. Like and I know it, and then stuff starts to pick up, and you can think a little bigger, and you get that exponential point, and people only see the end result. Like the Robert Kiyosaki's, I can't where you're at now. People see that like, how the hell do I get there?
Yeah.
Well, the problem is, Cole, you're so young, your brain's still developing.
That is true. My prefrontal cortex is still in the oven.
Yeah.
But if your dream, though, I really want to take this back. If your dream is $100,000 a year passive income, living on the beach where you can spend all the time with family and you can read books and write novels and do things that you're passionate about, or teach yoga or something that you don't have to make money. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that either. No. So just know that my dream and your dream can be totally different. It's your dream.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, just know that you get the chance to dream in America, and you don't have to be the Elon Musk of the world.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about this earlier in my podcast, but living too much in the future is also a thief because it can steal your joy, and comparison's a thief too, right? Like I love what you just said, because my dreams and my goals are mine. No, I'm not looking at this guy and this, like, they're mine. And so I don't care what that's so well said. It doesn't matter what your dream is. It's yours, and you got to own that.
I talk about Monty a lot. You know, I come home, I didn't see him this morning before he woke up, but I'll come home today and he's almost 2. He'll be so happy to see me. He's not going to ask me, Dad, did you go make money today? Dad, did you do a pocket? What did you, none of those things. He doesn't care. He just wants snuggles. Snuggles or tackle. We're learning tackle. He wants, read me a book. You go for a walk and hold my hand. He just wants time.
Yeah.
And so, the thing I'm thinking about a lot lately are my dreams, aspirations, and goals not allowing him to dream, which right now his dream is to spend time with mom and dad. And so if I'm only focused on me, I'm robbing him of his dreams.
Yeah.
And I think you were, when you were working 100 hours a week on the casino, and that the kids just want you there.
Totally. And I was missing out. That was not what we had planned.
Well, I think a lot of us too, we don't feel like we deserve that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like deep down, like even if we think like it's feasible, it's like, why me? Like, why do I deserve that? But I think coaches come in handy big time.
Yeah. I heard Brian Tracy say, on that thread one time, he was saying that he's never had an adult that their kids are, gone and moved out, say to him, man, I wish I wouldn't have spent that much time with my kids. And man, that was a ringer for me. I don't care how much time I got, and I've spent a ton of time with my kids. We've traveled the world. We set goals around, just talking about planning and fast forwarding. We continue to set goals every year, and that's part of like even our marriage mastermind. It's really important that you do that. We set goals, like literally last year, COVID derailed this, but Kara set a goal last year to spend $100,000 on travel. And I'm like, what? Like I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, are you serious? That was like a goal that she set for COVID year. We obviously didn't hit it, but we bought an RV instead.
I was gonna say, if you still have some money in that fund left over, Cole and I do have a fund set up for us.
Totally.
Travel fund.
Fund. But it's all around setting goals, right? And when you think about that, like we've spent a lot of time traveling with our kids. We always, at minimum, we take an international trip every year. We take anyway, it's all about goals, right? But when Brian Tracy said that, I don't care how much time you spend with your kids, it's never going to be enough. When they're gone and they're out of your house, you're going to be like, man, I wish I would have done just a little bit more.
And I'm saying that now with my parents. Like all they care about is spending time with me.
Yeah.
Like the dad, it's all he cares about at this point. It's just like.
Yeah. Now, do you guys, obviously Monty's 2, if I say, what do you want to do? He's going to say some park or, something silly. Do you guys, now that your kids are 20, obviously he's probably got his own life, but when they were maybe in that teenage year still in the home, did you guys sit around and do goals of like, where do you guys want to travel together? What do you guys want to do as a family? How do we make this where you're included instead of being, the kid where it's like, oh, my mom and my dad made us go camping and I hate camping. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, so that we always keep a list. So the kids would have their list of like places they wanted to go visit. It's funny because one year, Dylan shared his, and then Timmy shared his, and Kaiten was like, I want to go to Texas. And we're like, Texas? Like, she was probably 3 or 4. And we're like, why Texas? Because she'd never been to Texas. And she's like, that's where Sandy lives. And we're like, who's Sandy? The squirrel from SpongeBob. So, I think it is important to include the kids. And, that's getting that, the more we can do to get people, whether this is employees or business partners or kids or spouses even, like the more we can look at that. Like she was relating Texas to Sandy to a place that she thought she could actually go just by us bringing them into those decisions and processes. Yeah.
So one thing, we were having a conversation when we were golfing last week, and it really spoke volumes to me. So you have one son that is doing a bunch of like wake surfing and doing a podcast or like a YouTube channel and starting to make money and maybe a little bit more entrepreneur.
Yep.
And then you have another son that really likes music, right? Or and then he wants to do development for games and things like that. Maybe more he goes in that career. And it's funny because there was no difference in your tone of voice of how proud you were to brag about what they like to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't what dad wanted to do or that they're not going into business or real estate or whatever. It's like you were just as proud as this son as you were of your other son, as you were of your daughter being a good kid that's not focusing on boys, and just being, it was really cool. So you understand the individuality of your kids and you're supporting them in their dreams and goals, which you've allowed them to dream because you taught them that at an early age.
And we were talking about during the little break we just had, like you don't put expectations on them like a lot of parents do, like heavy, because those way kids, I remember I didn't have a ton, but I still had some. Those are heavy. I expect when you were 17 and you're like, what are you going to do for a living?
Yeah.
How are you going to make money in a year?
Yeah, or I coach an AAU team, and I started at third grade. There's sixth graders this year. We're not doing it this year. Sucks, but I would see these parents, and there's parents that just want their kids to have fun and enjoy it, and then there's parents that like have this expectations, like getting really into it and like putting pressure on them. And you could see these. I had this one kid, his dad would get mad at him or he'd pull him off at like a timeout or something, and this kid would just deflate. And it's just like, man, like because you're projecting your dreams and goals and expectations on him.
Yeah.
And you just see the world just come, the life when, if they did something bad, the first thing they would do is look at dad.
Yeah.
And like, is dad going to get mad?
Yeah. So it's natural for us to want to control process, control people. It's inherent. There's a lot of work that has to happen around that too. But I think whether we're talking about employees, whether we're talking about vendors, whether we're talking about children, we want to control. We want to control our spouse. Like it's really, if you want to have a successful relationship with a business partner, a marriage, an employee, just look through that filter. Am I trying to control the process and the outcome here? And it's fine when we're talking purely about process, like that's fine. But when we're talking about people, you can't control people. And that comes back to like kind of slave. The reason why the school system exists is to tear us down and control our thoughts. And I'm not trying to get political or even, into
That's fine.
communism, socialism, whatever,
It's
but
kind of a fact.
If you really want to control the outcome, control people. That's
Control their mind.
Yep. And so let's bring this back to kids. The worst thing you can do is control their mind. Now we need to guide and shape their minds. I got this from Brian Tracy too, but the one thing I've always told my kids is never, ever lie to me. Because we can get through anything if you just don't lie to me, just tell me the truth. Now, the other side of that, and I've had this conversation with many parents, if you tell your kids not to lie to you, then when they come and tell you the truth, you can't lash out at them. And that's where, this is really so simple at the end of the day. If you really want to have a true, honest, open relationship with your kids, just be a real person with them. But you can't set too many expectations around it either. And I will say this. If you don't have guidelines and some controls in place too, your kids will turn out soft and they might end up being lazy. And you see that in the second generation a lot. But here's like an example. My oldest son wanted to ride motocross and we went all in with him. I'll support. My wife and I say this all the time. If I had to narrow it down, this isn't a parenting show either, but if I had to narrow it down to one piece of advice for parenting, say yes as often as you can. Limit the amount of times that you say no. And even when it's a no, like my wife and I have done a really good job about, I won't question her in front of the kids, but why can't she do that? Like, what's the real no here? Is this just a no because we don't want to deal with it? Is this just a no because of some pre-programmed thing about my childhood? Say yes as often as you can. And so when my oldest son Dylan wanted to go all in on motocross, we went all in with him. And I bought him this weekend training course with Donnie Osmond over in Salt Lake, and we had to travel, and we stayed in a hotel, and this kid got his ass kicked. I got pictures of him. I'll show you later. But, you know, he's just dirty and you can see he's sad and he's wore out. Donnie's kicking his ass. And there's some high-performing kids in this group. And everything in him, you could tell he wanted to quit. He was crying. And I'm like, you keep going. You're finishing this class.
Yeah.
When you're done here, if you want to quit motocross or never come to a class again, you don't have to. But I'm not going to spend $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever it was and have you quit halfway through it. Get out there.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think that saying yes comes back to opportunities we've talked about. That you do that. It's the same with us. I need to say yes. When Tucker said, "Hey, do you want to take over the show?" I said yes. When Cole said, "Do you want to partner with this call center?" I said yes. You know, Cole, when I said certain things to him, he says yes. You don't ask why, how, or what.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, if Cole said, "Let's go get a bunch of hookers and shoot up heroin in the parking lot," you know, maybe I don't say yes to that. But there's within parameters, right?
Yeah.
You know, my wife, we don't want a bunch of sugar. Yeah, that's understandable.
That's such an extreme example.
Hookers and blow to sugar.
Yeah. So, but you know, there's certain things, but say yes to the opportunity. Say yes. Find out if you like it. Try that food. Try that motocross. Yeah. But when you commit, you don't fucking quit.
Yep.
You can quit when it's done, but you made a commitment to this. You finish that commitment.
Yeah. Well, how are you going to know, you know, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are if you don't go out there and fail? And it's no different with our kids. You got to you have to let them test things and try things out. And if we're so black and white about taking people down a certain road, we got to be careful with that. And by the way, this can relate to employees too. I'll just put this plug out there. But if you haven't read Dream Manager, it's really interesting to me because that whole book and concept is really about finding out what your employees' dreams are and how you can help them achieve that.
Mm-hmm. Nice. This is an amazing little tangent we've been on. I want to kind of get back a little bit on track.
You guys can edit all that out if
No.
you need to.
No. I'm just gonna take it and listen to do it on repeat.
The real deal is real people. It's awesome. All these things are awesome things to talk about. But I wanted to get back more on a real estate side.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we've kind of talked about your journey through your HVAC company, selling that, kind of the growth, what that looks like with the family side. We've kind of hit that all. Now in your real estate business, what is kind of the empire you guys have built look like on the day-to-day, on the kind of the macro, where you guys headed? Break it down.
Yeah, so let me back up just a little bit. So the goal of 20 income producing properties, we came back and we got 2 that first year. I got like 2 very low money down, no money down type deals. My mentor, this is kind of why I plugged him. He was an assessor, county recorder, owns a ton of real estate, hard money lender guy. So he kind of helped guide me through that process. He also lent me money, a lot of money along the way. I still borrow money from him.
Nice.
Yeah. Which my goal, by the way, is to be the lender. I don't think there's anything better than being in that shoe. But so got 2 deals done the first year. The second year, and I think this is important, this mobile home park deal falls in my lap, 72 space mobile home park deal. So I own 2 single families. My goal is 20. 72 space mobile home park deal presents itself to me. It's underperforming. It needs some work. The reason why I even knew about it was because we were doing a bunch of plumbing and HVAC in the community. And the lady that owned it was in some financial trouble. She was a developer out of Vegas or something, and she needed $80,000. Like, she needed to close in 15 days and needed $80,000. There was a first position note on it for $390,000. This thing had been listed for $1.2 million. It's probably worth $9 million, like really worth $9 million. So she needs $80,000. First position note of $390,000. So I go to Barry, my mentor, and I'm like, "What do you think of this deal?" The first position note is assumable. It's a guy that I still know today that I think it was 7% interest or something. It was assumable. So I called him. He said, "Yeah, no problem." I go to Barry and I'm scared shitless because I'm going from. This is why I think it's so important to adjust and not be so focused on your goals too that you don't take these opportunities that you guys are constantly talking about. Because if Kara and I had been so narrow-minded, we're like, no, our goal is 20 income-producing properties, single families. I'm scared of, I don't know what a mobile home park's like. I don't know what it's going to take to operate that. So I go see Barry. He's like, "You're lucky you're my friend or I'd steal this thing from you." He's like, "Go buy it." And I'm like, "But she wants to close in 15 days. I can't get title search done in 15 days. And he's like, "Get a preliminary ordered and let me look at it. And as long as we're comfortable with it, we'll close."
Real quick, I think this is huge because like we talked about earlier about walking through doors.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's overwhelming how many doors there are, but you can still peek through them.
Yeah.
Like you kind of just peek through this one. You're like, "Can I make it happen?"
Yeah.
Oh, talk to your buddy. Like, okay, I'm walking through this one. So.
Well, and there's a couple more doors behind that. Like I'm like, he's like, "Go do it. You can get it done in 15 days." And he's basically like, why are you still sitting here? And I'm like, I don't have the $80,000 cash for the down payment. Our business was successful, but again, as I said earlier in the interview, we're not spinning off a lot of cash yet. We're buying a lot of trucks. Just imagine this.
You're growing.
Yeah, I mean, 100 employees means 35 trucks. Imagine financing 35 trucks, 3 years, 4 years into business. Anyway, so he says, well, I'll loan you the down payment in second position at 9% interest.
No equity.
No, nothing. Just, yep. So the first position guy's letting me assume the 390 note. He's going to loan me the $80,000 down payment. So I'm into this thing for $470. It's probably worth $9. And then he says to me, I'm still scared shitless. This was like, if I close on this thing, it's almost 4 times my 10-year goal, right? As far as doors.
And there's more money than just the initial 80 grand that you need too. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you're coming out of your comfort zone. Like, how am I going to turn this thing
Yeah.
around? I mean, you don't have that much cash.
Here's the next door. Here's the last door. All that's running through my brain, right? And he says, listen, if anything goes wrong, I'll just take out the first position note. I'd love to have this park. So basically he's saying to me, I'll just repossess it, but I would actually want to.
Yeah.
And there'd be no hard feelings. He's the guy that taught me character, collateral, and credit.
So go ahead, go out and fail.
Yeah.
See what happens.
And he's like, and I'll be here to guide you through it. And so I bought my first mobile home park, and I actually sold that park, I don't know, a few years ago at 1.6 million, 1.65 million after, cash flowing for years. And so then to answer your question on the real estate, fast forwarding, Kara and I ended up with 5 mobile home parks, 45 single families and 3 commercial buildings. And then I sold my company in 2014. And then I often say this, like, this is why I think it's so important to not have our identity built up in what we do. Think about this as Americans. What do you do? What do you do? That's like this comes back from our programming.
It's how we like put people on a
box.
in a box on a scale of who are you, like who do I want to get to know.
Who was I talking? I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, Americans are always, what do you do? That's the first question. What is your profession? Other countries, they say, tell me about your family. That's their first question.
Yeah.
I think in America we like net worth equals human worth almost.
Yeah.
Well, and taking it a step further, network equals human worth. That makes a lot of sense, but most people are not thinking about net worth.
Yeah.
It goes back to that same programming. It's legalized slavery. We're taught from the time we're born that we're going to go to school.
Yep.
We're going to find our identity in what college we go to, what GPA we had, and what our career is.
Yep.
That we've been programmed to think this way.
Yeah. You're a janitor. You must have fucked up at life.
Yeah.
Yep.
You must have made mistakes. You're a teacher. Okay, you went, whatever. You're a doctor, man. You're smart. You're a lawyer. Oh, everything has this different, things. And it is. It's you put people in a box. You immediately judge them by their career choice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wrong. It's wrong. Hey, you guys play the cash flow game? Because when you say janitor, like
all the time,
you can win being a janitor and get your ass kicked as a lawyer.
Yeah, it's because it goes back to we're a consumer economy.
Yeah.
So just because you make more money doesn't mean, and you have a nicer house doesn't mean you're better off. So.
And I think most of your listeners have probably read this, but just thinking about the mindset shift, I think the most powerful book I ever read, and I've read it multiple times, is the Cash Flow Quadrant, even more than Rich Dad Poor Dad, because it really gets you thinking in terms of how your mindset works around, employee, self-employed, business owner, and investor. So I'll sit with somebody for 5 minutes and I can tell basically personality-wise who they are based on ESBI. I can peg them in 5 minutes just from talking to them.
So, okay, where Cole and I?
I would say actually, obviously.
Or you can go separate because, Cole, we're different.
Well, so here's the thing. You flow in and out of quadrants, right? I don't think either one of you guys are obviously employees. That's to state the obvious, Houston. But I don't think either one of you, although you're in self-employed quadrant, you don't want to be there. You're moving toward investor. And in big business, this is categorized different ways. You guys think as big business owners, and you definitely think as investors. So I would peg you as self-employed at this stage, because that's actually, the realm you're in. Kiyosaki, it's hard to pin him down, but he says big business is like 300 to 500 employees. But what I would say is that the way you guys are thinking is big business.
Yeah.
You're not there yet, but that's your thought process. And so if you actually, from the other side, I look at it as, but I use it to check myself too. And so if you really want to think about how to get yourself out of the years of programming, this is why Rich Dad Poor Dad did so well.
Yeah.
Because we've been programmed so long around that he just basically flipped it.
Yep.
And he's just unprogramming.
Yeah.
So do you want me to keep?
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, keep kind of moving along the.
Yeah.
I think we about 15 minutes left.
So sold the business in 2014, and I think this is important because I say that was the best and worst day of my life. Literally my exit from that business, I could have retired on that. And I did for a minute. I still get paid today.
Yeah. How do you, without numbers, selling a business is, it's this, you hear it on the news, or on the stock market. What is selling a 100-person business or a business like that? How does that work? How do you structure that? Like you've told me before, you still get paid on that business. How do you set something like that structure? Because everything in life and in business is how you structure deals a lot of times.
Well, so I think the initial easy answer to that is think win-win, right? Back to Franklin Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If it's true win-win, then there's a million ways to structure it. It was all about finding, and I don't know if I've told you this, but it was finding a win for me and my partner at that point in time. So he ended up buying me out, but I created seat A and seat B. And it wasn't because we weren't good partners. It was because my long-term goals didn't align with being in that business. And so it came down through a series of events. And again, life will happen for you and not to you. A series of events led us down a road where another company wanted to buy half of our business. And so him and I are sitting on this side of the table negotiating against this big $8 billion behemoth for 6 or 7 months. Like literally we'd go to Salt Lake and meet in conference rooms with, there are people from Finland and Canada and Mexico. And so basically by the end of that, we walked away because we were like $1.5 million apart on this sale. But now my partner and I had a valuation that we were comfortable with for 50% of the business because we were negotiating against another company. So that happened for me.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're not negotiating against each other as partners. We already did, the negotiation already happened. And so I basically said, well, here's what the worth of the company is. Seat A will take the company, seat B will leave. And here's what the buyout looks like, and here's what we do with the real estate and blah, blah, blah. And he picked. I let him pick.
Which side he wanted?
Yeah.
Or you would either take the business, yourself and he could get bought out, or you would get bought out. And my partner tells me this all the time. The key to any good deal or partnership, I'll cut the pie, you pick the piece.
Yeah. And I'd be willing to take either piece.
Yeah.
If the pie is cut fairly.
Yeah. If you cut it in the mind where it's like, okay, I could get fucked with this piece or this piece, you're going to cut it fair. Because you want,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I let him pick, and at first he picked leaving. I'm like, great. So we meet with all of our employees, and
Was it like he didn't think you were serious or something?
I don't know. Maybe. So we meet with all of our. No, I think he really genuinely thought he wanted to leave. There's a lesson in this too, because like I said, that was the best and worst day of my life because I retired, but then I also realized that my identity was wrapped in it. So back to him. I think he genuinely wanted to leave. We met with our employees. We said, hey, we're leaving. Mike's going to be getting bought out. This is going to be an overnight transition, blah, blah, blah. Everybody's like, great. We're all on board. I get a phone call like a week later, and he's like, hey, can we go to dinner with the wives? I'm like, sure. So he sits down, and he's like, I've been thinking about this, and I don't know, what I've never imagined selling this company. I don't know what my life's going to look like. I want to stay. Great. Like I didn't
Here's
care.
this piece of pie.
Yeah. So then we go meet with our employees, and we're like,
Switch.
just kidding. Mike's leaving, which was fine too.
Is he still running it today? Is he doing well?
Yeah,
Is
he's
he
doing
still growing it?
Yeah. Well, it's growing profitability wise. It's shrunk, but that doesn't matter.
I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
It's like the guys that wholesale 100 houses a year or a month or whatever. They say, oh, I do all these deals. Shit, I'd rather do 5 deals a
Well,
year.
I was doing that. We were doing
Yeah.
12, 15 deals
Yeah.
a month, and our revenue looked great, but I was making nothing.
Yeah.
And then now we're doing 4, 5, 6.
Yeah,
and
like when you told me like you'd make $200,000 in revenue and
take home $7,500.
yeah, and you're like, what the something's wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Go get a job. Like at that point, like slave to my own business.
yeah. Well, that's the powerful part of business coaching and mentors and stuff. So you don't
Yeah.
get too far down the road and realize like we eat last.
Yeah.
Like that's crazy when it comes to. I just put a podcast about this out. Like, a tenth of all you make is yours to keep. Karen and I try to do 30. If you're not paying yourself, we get paid last. The vendors get paid, the employees get paid.
Government gets paid.
Yeah, everybody gets
Yeah.
paid but us.
Yeah. it's funny, you start seeing all these people saying rent strikes or socialism, all this stuff, and it's like, you wouldn't have any of this without capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we take the risk, the time, and the sweat and tears, and look how many people fail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just crazy.
Yeah.
But they just want more, but whatever. I digress.
This is part of the programming.
Yeah, so you so then you sold the business.
Yep.
And then you're like, you retired for a minute, figured out you don't want to sit on your hands.
Yeah.
And you
Well, Karen and I have a pretty good real estate portfolio too.
Yeah, you had you had 5 parks, you had the 45 doors already. So you could basically go ride off in the sunset, go live in Tahiti or something.
Yeah.
What then you decided to ramp up real estate after that? So.
Yeah, well, so it was interesting because actually one of my first clients when we started the business in 2004, I got introduced to him, and he was a big syndicator, a commercial syndicator out of Vegas. I didn't know what the hell syndication meant then. But he had, I think him and his partners had like 200 million square feet of commercial property under management. Big numbers. Nicest guy in the world, and he became kind of a mentor to me too. I met him because he bought a ranch in Nevada where I lived, and I actually physically replumbed his house. He was one of my first clients when I was still working out in the field. And so over a period of time, he'd mentioned to me when he saw me buying real estate, he's like, you should really start thinking about syndicating, putting deals together, bringing in partners, whatever, just we're doing fine on our own. So after that, I just kind of went on this journey, and I was like, what's next? And I had asked him a couple times about syndication, like how do I get into this? And he told me a book to buy, and I bought it. It was Gene Trowbridge's book. So I bought Gene Trowbridge's book, and we were in Phoenix. We came down here for vacation, and I was reading that, and it sounded interesting. Well, then Tyler, one of my good friends, he sent me a link to the Real Estate Guys Secrets of Successful Syndication event. Yeah, and I was like, this was January, let's call it January 15th, and the event's January 22nd. And so I went and showed my wife, I'm like, I'm going to this. And she's like, I'm going with you.
Nice.
And so we flew down to Phoenix. I met all the real estate guys. I signed up for their masterminds. Goes back to coaching and mentoring, right?
And you met Randy Hubbs, wasn't Randy Hubbs?
I met Randy Hubbs.
Yeah.
That's where I met Andrew, my partner.
Yeah, Randy Hubbs, the local guy that was a teacher and a music teacher forever, but he was doing real estate. We'll get him on the show sometimes, but he's doing real estate, then started syndicating. He's got a big thing down in Belize right now, but he still taught and did his passion and like lived his passion and just did real estate on the side, and he's freaking wealthy.
I've traveled the world with those guys.
Yeah.
They're awesome. Randy and Jana, they're just good people. But this is the importance of like getting in these environments, getting in those rooms like we were talking about before, right? I always want to be the dumbest guy in the room. I want to find the bigger rooms, and you're always going to get stretched too. If it doesn't hurt a little bit, you're probably not buying big enough. You're probably not dreaming big enough. And at the end of that Secrets of Successful Syndication event, they did the little pitch for their mastermind, which is different now. They have an inner circle, and then they have the main level mastermind. But at the end of that, it's a 2-year commitment, and it was $25,000 a year. And I had paid that for the coaching for my whole team, right? And then there's travel. You had to travel 4 times a year, and you got to go to the events and everything else. And I was like, it was one of those times where I knew, I don't know how I'm going to pay for it. I don't know. It's a big ticket, right? My wife's like, yeah, I think you need to do it. And I signed up, and that's kind of where we got into where we're at now. That's how I ended up meeting my partner, Andrew, just kind of figuring out what the next stage was. And so to answer your question, we have a company called Four Peaks Capital Partners, Park Place Communities, which is the management company. And we have 35 communities in 13 states now.
How much dollar volume assets under management?
We're probably right around 55 million.
Gotcha. Wow. Nice. So you get into mobile home parks before Brendan Turner started talking about mobile home parks. And so you're 2015, 2016, running up, and then all of a sudden 2018, 2019, Brendan Turner tells the whole world that he's going to go buy mobile home parks. Now all of a sudden the hottest topic in the world is freaking buying mobile home parks, right? It was a kind of a under the radar asset class. Now you're hearing hedge funds are looking at buying them. You got Blackstone, I think, is looking at that asset class. They're trying to find yield anywhere, right? Where do you go from here?
Yeah, it's interesting times. I mean, we could get into a huge macro debate about this, but I don't think affordable housing is going anywhere. We're having a harder time finding yield as everybody is. I mean, you're seeing literally in GoBundance, there's a broker in there that's on the seller side. And, we got parks trading at 3 caps, 3.5 caps, 4 caps. A lot of international money's looking at parks. People are just looking for safe cash flow. And, you got your money sitting in a bank and it's returning 0.001% interest. I mean, inflation, the Fed has raised their inflation targets to surpass 2%, right? And so before, the mandate was always keep it under 2%. Now they're like, well, we're going to just let it go a little bit. So if you're buying a park at a 3 cap and inflation's 3% and you're in all cash, no interest, then essentially people are just looking for a bank. Like a safer bank.
Yeah, there's some parked their cash.
How are you guys finding your deals at this point?
So we're actually, contrary to what a lot of people are out doing right now, we've slowed down our acquisition strategy. We started slowing down last year. We're not the guys that want to find deals just to have more assets under management and get the fees and all that. And when COVID happened, it accelerated a lot of challenges that we saw coming. Obviously, just like everybody else, we had to adjust. We had to lean out a lot of it, actually. So, we're working on a much thinner team, if you will, and we want to just stay lean. And so I'm not saying that we're not buyers in the sense that, we did 12 deals last year.
Yeah, because when I first met you, you said your goal for the next year was to buy 2,000 pads.
That was what our goal was. Yeah.
For this year?
Yep, that was our goal. But honestly, even before COVID, we were kind of like, man, it's getting frothy. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing. I'm not saying you can't find deals. But we're just not interested. We're not interested in turning and burning to that level. And we have properties that we've bought along the way too. We've got plenty of work to do over the next 1, 2, 3 years that we don't need to be out bringing on more. We can just, literally, we were having this conversation, but we're texting. I think we could set 1,000 homes and remodel another 400 and be in good shape. So we're kind of hunkering down right now. And
what about developing and building? I know I have a buddy in my hometown. He built, tested it on a 5-acre piece, built like a 20, 30 pad spot. I think he just bought 10 acres. I think he's gonna do like a 50-acre. I know these guys. This guy's an airline pilot, and they own
Ryan Gibson.
Yeah, Ryan Gibson.
Up in State. They just built a massive one up in Black Diamond.
Yeah, they're building like a 250 pad. What have you ever looked at the yield on building?
Yeah, so yes, and it's obviously there, and I think it's only going to get better. In fact, if you look at, I don't know what's going to happen with Biden and everything else, but you look at a lot of what Trump was promoting. He was actually with Ben Carson, which I don't know that Ben Carson will get removed from, HUD. But all that being said, the government is pro affordable housing.
Correct. Well, they have none.
Yeah, but then here's the other side of it. Federal government is pro affordable housing. Local municipalities,
correct.
State is not necessarily friendly because of zoning and everything else. They might say they are, and I think it has to get to a point where I think you're going to see more development and more opportunity. Here's the challenge. It's longer term money. So when people are looking for yield, like, whether it's our fund or Brandon Turner's fund or anybody else's fund, they're not necessarily looking for the development type return. Like, we're going to go build storage units or we're going to build multifamily or whatever. The construction timeline to a community could be, from buying the land to actually
3 years.
Yeah, to completely get it out. Yeah. But I think you could get the spaces in and everything else in probably 12 to 15 months. Mm. And then you start setting homes. Well, there's a couple challenges right now. I was just talking to a Clayton rep yesterday. The factories are backed up 6 to 7 months right now.
Jeez.
So the timeline, the only I'm not saying it's not a viable solution or option, but when you look at the timeline to build that out, if you went and built 200 pads, are you going to be able to get them filled up in 5 years? And are our investors willing to carry it out that long?
Yeah, where their IRR maybe starts really hitting towards the end of the 4 to 7 year mark, mm-hmm. but they see no return on the initial first 4 years.
Yeah.
But one thing I think, we talked about, I don't remember if it was on your show or ours, we were talking about there's opportunity everywhere. Mm-hmm. You just said a couple of things really quick that it's just like triggers my brain. Like Clayton Homes, who is one of the biggest manufactured home parks, they're 6 to 7 months out. There's opportunity there to fill some gap, right? Not saying I'm going to go build mobile homes, but there's opportunity. Mm-hmm. There's affordable housing. There's opportunity, right? In Pasco, they just
you're saying you're going to go build.
Yeah. No, in my town in Pasco, they just increased the urban growth boundary, but they have land inside of it. Mm-hmm. But the problem is they only have like maybe 2% of their land is for high density stuff.
Yeah.
And it's in the worst part of town. It's like your price. You don't understand these municipalities. They say they need affordable housing, but they're like, where are we going to put them?
Yeah,
You know, where are we going to
not
put
in my
the, you know,
backyard.
because it's the preconceived notions that mobile home parks are poor people and
Yeah.
poor people create crime and they're bad.
Yeah.
So it's just,
Well, and on the opportunity front too, you bring up a good point, and there's pendulum swings, right? And so even though if you would have asked me about development 4 years ago, it would have been a flat out no, that doesn't make any sense.
yeah.
But now, I mean, investors were wanting 8 to 10 to 12%, you know, prefs and this kind of stuff 3-4 years ago, where now people are starting to settle for 6 prefs. And so we might get into an environment where development makes a lot more sense, especially if we can't infill enough. I know a big part of the strategy for mobile home operators in general was poaching older homes, right? That's slowed way down. I mean, it's really hard to get your hands on old homes. A lot of municipalities we looked at a deal outside of St. Louis, Granite City, and there was a lot of potential there, but the city zoning would only allow you to bring in new homes.
Gotcha.
You couldn't bring in used homes or any of that. And so when we looked at the amount of spaces that were there and getting that amount of new homes didn't make sense at the price point. I mean, I think you could do probably 1 new home to 3 used, but so over time the strategies have to change, and the market and the environment we're in, development might make a lot of sense over the next couple of years.
And to your point, you're experienced enough to see that and read in the zoning code. There's a lot of new syndicators out there right now that maybe go buy that park because it looks really good. They don't realize how hard it's going to be to get freaking those new homes. And so really working with a syndicator that knows what he's doing. I was listening to our friend Ken McElroy the other day, and he was talking about they're not buying, apartment communities that are pre-built right now because they can build them for cheaper and there's no yield and there's no upside in a lot of these things. So they're actually going into development. He's like, we always make money. We just shift with the way the tides are.
So you're not in a hurry. I think that's where people get in trouble is when
Yeah.
they're in a rush.
Yeah.
To-
Oh, they got to place a deal. I have all this money. I gotta find a deal.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where the acquisition strategy, you got to be really careful because, and we've made a ton of mistakes getting here, guys. Like when you say that about experience, I mean, those are scars, right? As you mentioned earlier in a conversation, that like those are scars and they don't leave you, they affect you. So the way that we've learned to really pay attention to the zoning is getting hurt by zoning, right? And so I think that's the big key is just finding the experience and sticking through it.
Kind of moving to wrap up here. What is the now that you guys are kind of have your 55 million, you said, assets under management. Is there another part of real estate you want to get into too, or what does the next 5-10 years out look like for
5 till 2?
Okay. Yeah. So for us, we're doing a couple things here. We're offloading some parks right now because parks are trading at ranges right now that are just crazy. So we've got some parks that we're selling that we weren't planning on selling 6 months ago, but the prices have really been driven up. So that's part of our strategy. We're also offloading some underperforming parks that, we bought in portfolios and different times that are just not performing for us. So we're offloading some of that. We're really trying to narrow our portfolio from, let's say, 35 communities down to 20, 25 communities, the best of the best. Hang on to those, get those turned around. I think we're going to get back into an environment of acquisitions. I just think it's probably not going to be park by park for us necessarily. I think teaming up maybe with some other operators that need some help, whether it's financing, raising capital, operations, any of that kind of stuff. I think there's going to be opportunity to consolidate different operations groups.
Go buy like other little funds that have some parks under management kind of thing.
Yeah.
Start
Yeah.
eating those guys.
We love the space though, and the affordable housing space is great. So I don't see that going away.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we got to run. We probably talk for another hour. Mike's got some stuff he's got to get to. Thanks so much for listening. I think, again, this was one of our best episodes.
Been awesome.
Yeah, we really
Thanks for coming
appreciate
on.
you and your time and look forward to getting to know you more over the years, hopefully.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me.
All right, thanks. See you guys.